what I think from my perspective needs to happen is more education, more understanding and more normalisation of conversation in the real world. Because if I go now speaking at a corporate and I explain it the way that I see it from sitting behind the fence and now I'm being very submersed in the community, they get it. Because I'm just talking from a human point of view of this is how I see why it's evolved in that way. And they get it because I'm not shouting about it. I'm not telling them they have to understand what I'm saying. I'm just trying to say it from a personal point of view of why acceptance is very needed for somebody's health and well-being and life. And I think that's because I've had so much trauma hiding who I was from a mental health point of view. I kind of try and put it back to them that do I not have a right just to live my life? And you accepted me running around a track and winning 2 gold medals for Great Britain. So if I tell you I'm gay now, does that change your opinion? And if it does, it's your problem. I've got that language now to be able to share with people, which I didn't have before because I didn't have a voice.
Hi, my name is Nadia Nagamutu, business psychologist, coach, speaker and founder of Avenir Consulting, which creates organisational growth and success via inclusion and diversity. We've been discussing the benefits that diversity brings to companies' bottom line performance for decades with more and more evidence. But there are so many questions organisations still have about how to achieve it. How do you create a culture where people feel valued for their uniqueness and the qualities they bring? I believe it's crucial to the future success and sustainability of every organisation that they find the answer to this question to make sure that each employee is not only supported but also appreciated. With this podcast, I aim to get some of the key challenges to creating inclusive workplaces out in the open and start uncovering the solutions to embracing a culture that cares for everyone. I'm going to be having conversations with some of the most inspiring people in different countries and across industries who are pushing the boundaries on inclusion and diversity in the workplace, from topics such as parenting in the workplace, ethnicity, age, gender, mental health, and all things inclusion. I want to create a movement to change society through sharing life experiences and creating more empathy and connection. Why care? I believe that once we have organisations and societies that accept and value everyone for who they are, we become healthier, happier and better in our roles both inside and outside work. Hello and welcome to another Season 4 special episode of Why Care? My name is Nadia Nagamutu and I am your host. I can't express how deeply honoured I am to speak to Dame Kelly Holmes about her life experiences, which she offers in her new book, Unique. Kelly doesn't need much of an introduction, given her many world-class achievements, but here's some of her backstory. She joined the British Army at 17, serving for nearly 10 years as a qualified HGV driver and physical training instructor. During a 12-year international career, Kelly won multiple medals at Commonwealth, European, World and Olympic level, culminating in 2 gold medals at the 2004 Olympic Games in Athens, which cemented her place in history as the first woman ever in Great Britain to win 2 gold medals at the same Games. In 2005, she was honoured with a damehood for services to sport. In 2008, Kelly founded and is now president of the Dame Kelly Holmes Trust, which puts world-class athletes shoulder to shoulder with disadvantaged young people to engage, enable and empower them to be the best version of themselves. She continues to win awards for how she role models and inspires. In this episode, we talk about Kelly's painful story of hiding aspects of who she was for the majority of her life, and how she carried almost a double persona, what the world wanted her to be, and who she felt she was but couldn't share. We talk about the fear and terror invoked due to being a gay woman in the military, and the freedom and liberation she now feels being able to own who she is. Kelly offers the horrific stories of what happened to LGBTQ+ military officers that she shed light on in the powerful ITV documentary Kelly Holmes Being Me, which aired in 2022. She talks about her incredible experience of being at London Pride and being able to stand up as an advocate and finally being part of a community. Her story is so deeply moving, as well as full of hope and power. Enjoy. Hello, and a huge welcome to Kelly Holmes, Dame Kelly Holmes. Thank you so much for joining me on Why Care?
You're welcome.
So, thinking about our brief conversation back at the European Diversity Awards in November, And actually, your book had only just been released back then, right? And since then, I've had an opportunity to read your book, Unique, which I have to say, I think I told you this as well. It was quite a roller coaster, emotional journey, reading about your journey. And what really struck me now, I'm a psychologist, so I'm completely sort of trained, so to speak, to really listen and understand emotions in particular. And what struck me as I read through your story about how you covered who you are fundamentally, not just your sexuality, but a lot of aspects of who you are in the military and as a British athlete. That fear was the word that came to mind. And sometimes terror. That word is so shocking that people live in terror. And it struck me in a number of occasions as you were writing how much fear and terror played a part in your life. I really would love to hear from you how that experience has been, how it has shaped who you are now.
Yeah, I think there's many parts of my life that maybe I didn't recognise that fear was a big part of that journey. And it was almost from early days right up until 2022 that I think that way of feeling inside when you are kind of out of control of some of the situations, because your brain's doing a lot of it, fear's debilitating, you're preempting the worst, and maybe trauma that you've had in different parts play a massive part of that, and then it just builds and builds and builds. But I wrote my autobiography back in 2005. Now, when I wrote that, everyone expects it again to be a sporting bio. And what I wanted back then was to ensure that it was actually about the life journey of taking a dream and making it become reality, and how difficult that was from a sporting perspective, because when you feel like you're not very good at something and the dream became bigger than the reality of the person, is that's how I can prove to myself I can be great. The sporting success overrun those sort of thoughts of inferiority, complex, negativity to my life. So then obviously the journey I've been on since then, that created me doing this book past doing my documentary, was really to showcase the fact that other trauma led to me having a lot of mental health problems. It stopped me being happy, yet I was still successful. And it's almost like blending the two, reality of the story with the script that everyone might have been inspired with anyway, to actually just say, well, actually in life, it wasn't always as good as it could have been, but I was still successful. So it's that back and forth with, those thoughts and those dreams and how I got there.
There's so much, exactly as you say, it felt like you were living the lives of like almost two different people. There was the life of the person, Dame Kelly Holmes, who'd won 2 gold medals and had a military career, very successful. And yet this other individual who just didn't feel like they were accepted or could be who they are, and completely covering key fundamental aspects of your identity. And so many people still do that. Your story is not unique in the sense that, of course, you are unique as an individual, but unfortunately, people cover constantly, and particularly when it comes to LGBTQIA+, what's the steps that we need to take societally? There's quite a big question here, but what do you think? Because we made incredible progress. I don't want to deny that, but what do you see as what's necessary?
Yeah. So I think with the LGBTQIA community, for me, it was really interesting to see how it's evolved over the years, because when I realised I was gay, I was 18, that was in the 80s. Now in the 80s, you had the AIDS epidemic, you had a real society area of real kind of bigotry and bullying, and the sort of world of being gay was very much obviously stigmatized, but there was a lot of real kind of innuendo and kind of, oh, you're gay, and it was all like this stuff that you used to hear. And of course with the AIDS epidemic, that was such a heightened piece that I think it sort of frightened a lot of people to admit that they may have been gay during those years, because of course there was so much negativity around that epidemic, because no one really knew exactly what it was. So then you get to a point of where the growth changed in the 90s and LGBT.
Yes.
And, I've sort of sat on the periphery because, yes, I've been a gay woman for a majority of my life. And I had a lot of people that knew about me in my army days when it was, I know we'll get to it, but when it was actually really difficult. But in society, I've seen the evolution. Now, roll on right up until 2022, when I did my documentary. Over those years, I've seen the community grown, and I've also seen how people have accepted or not accepted that growth. So if I go out and I'm speaking just generally and nobody really knows about me, whether they assume or not, didn't matter, you hear so much about why is this happening? Why is that happening? And I used to be one of those people going, why are we going through the alphabet? Like, I just didn't get why we're trying to separate everybody until I've had the freedom to listen and to learn and understand more the need for identity to be almost segregated so that somebody feels part of being seen, but almost also understanding the need for that visibility. Because at the end of the day, no matter what anyone says, the LGBTQI has always been something forever. It's just not been articulated, identified, put in, into these silos, but we've always existed. What it's done now is given people a voice and a platform to become themselves. What I think, from my perspective, needs to happen is more education, more understanding, and more normalization of conversation in the real world. Because if I go now speaking at a corporate and I explain it the way that I see it from sitting behind the fence, and now I'm being very submersed in the community, they get it. Because I'm just talking from a human point of view of this is how I see why it's evolved in that way. And they get it because I'm not shouting about it. I'm not telling them they have to understand what I'm saying. I'm just trying to say it from a personal point of view of why acceptance is very needed for somebody's health and well-being and life. And I think that's because I've had so much trauma hiding who I was from a mental health point of view. I kind of try and put it back to them that, do I not have a right just to live my life? And you accepted me running around a track and winning 2 gold medals for Great Britain. So if I tell you I'm gay now, does that change your opinion? And if it does, it's your problem. I've got that language now to be able to share with people, which I didn't have before because I didn't have a voice. So it's really evolving for me as well as a person.
What you just said is really powerful there, which is thinking from a business perspective and organizational perspective, who have the responsibility then to ensure that anyone, no matter your diversity characteristics, whether we're talking about sexual orientation or otherwise, that everyone has that ability to voice who they are and therefore have the language to be able to share exactly what you've shared and feel okay, feel psychologically safe to be able to do that. And I think that a lot of organizations, particularly maybe, and then you've already spoken a little bit about the military, and I have to say, gosh, reading about the raids, it brought a completely different lens to the experience of people who might have been in a same-sex relationship or identified other than hetero, what they must have gone through at the time of living in that fear of those spontaneous raids, searching for any evidence.
Yeah.
Hi there. If you're enjoying this episode and want to further expand your thinking and develop your leadership, I've written a book that you might find useful. It's called Beyond Discomfort: Why Inclusive Leadership is So Hard and What You Can Do About It. The book is framed around a new model of inclusive leadership which explores 4 belief systems and offers pause for reflection on how you view diversity, equity and inclusion, or DEI for short. You'll gain new perspectives of some of the knotty DEI concepts, learn about the experiences of others who may be different to you, and develop an appreciation for alternative truths. Whether you're new to DEI or have spent many years developing your knowledge, whether you're a business leader or DEI practitioner, my book offers a comprehensive learning opportunity. It gives you tools, tips and advice to lead beyond discomfort, both individually as a leader and how to create systemic inclusion in the workplace. So if this sounds useful to you, check out the information in the show notes and click on the link to get your copy of Beyond Discomfort. Back to the episode. In the ITV documentary, it was clear that things have moved on in the military. There's some huge amount of progress. What would you say the work still needs to be? What needs to happen?
I suppose firstly, for those that don't maybe know about the military setup. So whilst in society, we got to a point of lifting all the bans on homosexuality in society, the military still had those bans from 67 to 2000, only 2000 when they were lifted. And basically it was essentially against the law to be gay or another in the military. Now, I didn't stop people being gay because, of course, you are who you are.
Exactly.
But what happens is that you join an organisation, something like the military, because you want a career. First and foremost, you don't join because you're thinking about your relationships and, a kind of a part-time job. You join because you want to be, in my case, a soldier. And when I did join, I didn't realise that I was gay either because, of course, it was a month before I was 18. I was still just a teenager. And back then, society really, at school was, sex education was birds and the bees and blowing up condoms. There was no association about anything different. So I was an athlete, I was an athlete as well. So my life was consumed with performance. So joining the military, I realised that I was attracted to a woman and I didn't know what those feelings meant, but I just felt comfortable in that environment or that feeling. But then at the same time, being young and really wanting to career and then finding and learning about this kind of law that was in place, of course, then everything was hidden. And it was hidden from the way of you just get on with your job, but you can't stop being who you are. So you get to know, in this world, you get to know who's gay or who's accepted and it's just sort of like a unspoken language almost. I don't know, I think it's quite powerful. People from the community getting that sense of being, I think is really something that maybe people that aren't in the community don't have as a value, as you get to know, you just for some reason get to see that they're on the same page as you. So anyway, the biggest thing is I wanted a career. So, there was rules like you can't sit on a bed with both feet off the ground if somebody was the same sex of you. I mean, it was just so ridiculous.
Are you serious?
Okay, you know what I mean? Most of the time, no one even knew who they weren't seeing people. No one knew if they were gay, weren't gay. You didn't have those conversations. So it's just so ridiculous thinking back on it. But there became a time when I was 22 and you talk about the raid. So what happened then is that we got this tip off and now I'm a corporal in the military. I was in charge of the gymnasium. I was in charge of potential officers' fitness. It was at Army School of Languages. So I was in charge of people around the world. I had a really responsible job. And what happened is that the military police had come into our barracks and everyone gets tipped off on anything that happens, let's face it, that this raid was happening. Now, what I didn't know, and I've got to know now, that in the era of sort of 92, 93, 94, it was a witch hunt. It was a witch hunt to kind of eradicate anybody that might have been of this demise. And that came, of course, from the top in an organisation. This came from the top. So this definitely would have been the white male dominant kind of got to be seen to be in control type effect. And the law obviously being in place allowed them to get away with some of the things that they did get away with, which were not conducive to what the law was. So they came round to our barracks, for example. My thing and where my fear started from an identity point of view was that, let's imagine anyone listening, not being at home now, going home, and the burglars are in your house. They're ripping through every single belonging, but they're not going. And whatever they think they've got on you, which is completely unfounded in terms of got anything to, it's not going to hurt anyone. They're vilifying you. They're kind of asking you really intense and personal questions that you just think, what are you doing? You just feel sort of so afraid. And I was afraid of losing my job. I loved my job. I absolutely loved it. I wanted to be in the army since I was 14. So you kind of just are there complying to this heinous sort of ad. And then when all that happened, I used to have to hide even letters from my sister and my best mate. I mean, I wasn't even going out with anyone then, sister and best mate in the back of a car, just because if it had love, Lisa, love. It was like, now I think about it, I think it's ridiculous. But what happened was, and during the documentary, I got to know about other military personnel who were terrorized in terms of sexual abuse, verbal abuse, jailed in some senses, long service medals being taken away from them, sent home to tell their parents that they were getting kicked out of the army, having their record book, having red writing across the top saying being dismissed with disgrace. I mean, it was ridiculous what's happened. And so back to the kind of crux of the question was the fear that instilled in me as a young person. I never went away, and we'll come to that in a minute. But finding out about these other situations that we now know happened to thousands of military personnel, those that have even fought on the front line, those that had got to high-ranking officers being dismissed with disgrace because they may have or may not have been attracted even to somebody. And so when you think about all of that and how that's gone in that lifetime, there's so many people living their life to this day who might be in their 60s, their 70s, that have gone through that innate kind of hurt and anger and mental health issues because of what happened to them serving their country. Now, that for me was something I wanted to explore during the documentary, and I'm pleased to say that there's a lot of ground being made. It's actually now more of an issue if you are known to be homophobic or racist or whatever. So actually the tables have turned for the right reason. But you can imagine, for me, what happened then, the actual issue was that I was also became a world-class athlete when I talked about being gay. So I had the two sides of me thinking, how am I ever going to live my life authentically?
Exactly. And the world looking at you at that point as well. It's not just what was going on in the military. And what you described, it's like being stripped of all your humanity. Like, it's like you're treated as an object. And you do talk about that as well in terms of that trauma and how you sort of almost felt like you were a commodity to the military, to your country for your sporting achievements. And yet, and I could feel when you say that you didn't understand what value you had outside of what you were offering them as a person. That was hard to read.
Yeah. I think there's a point where everything I ever wanted to do was to achieve my ultimate goal since I was 14. Like, I would literally wanted to be in the army as a physical training instructor, and I wanted to be Olympic champion. And that came from such a deep and rooted need to be somebody, like literally believe I could be it. And, I'm not religious, but maybe I'm a bit spiritual. I just feel like I'm here for a reason. And I don't know, sometimes I think I know why. And sometimes I think I'm still on that journey of becoming the person where I'm going to be here. And it's really weird because I've achieved so much. But I think when you put your mindset into it's about high performance achievement to almost blur the insecurities that you have as a person, you jump in with both feet. And so anyone that attacks or something that then comes up to potentially stop you doing that is like, it feels like it rips you apart, because you think, oh, what else have I got? I've got nothing else, because my mindset is telling me this is who I am. And so with the military side of it, I didn't want somebody else's opinion to rip me apart, when actually I know I worked so hard to be the best PTI I could be. I was like, literally, any feedback, any reports, anything, I went through the ranks quicker than other people, because I knew I put 100% into being in that role. Then because I was a junior international athlete before I went into the military, and I, achieved a really great level as a junior, but that wasn't a career back then. So going into the army was about a career, but I still had a talent that was untapped. And I knew that I still believed I would be this Olympic champion. So when I was sort of coming into the thought process of, actually, do you know what, my other dream, I really want that. I'm a soldier who doesn't want to lose a career, and I'm also a person that wants to achieve something that maybe no other people hadn't had within their psyche, to be an Olympic champion. So I was coupling two really big thought processes about, I want to be the best in my career, and I'm a soldier and I'm hard, and I want to be the best athlete and stand on top of a podium. And they're sort of not things that everyday people have necessarily, as this kind of, got to do this at such a high level. So when I came into athletics, but coupled with the military, I used to maintain the fact that I want to be a really good soldier first and foremost, hence why I used to lose my leave to go away and compete as an athlete, so that the credibility of me as a person stayed really high, and it would negate any other negative that could have come if, went to sexuality, because I didn't have to have that all the time. That was just very much you learn a language, you live your life, you do a job well, and only sometimes it was that compromised with the raid or whatever. The rest of the time it's about, I'm a good PTI and I'm going to get as far as I can.
Yeah.
When I went into athletics, they're seeing this person who was doing extraordinary things with a military badge upon them. So of course they were proud of me in that sense. But world-class athletics, there was not anyone out in world-class sport back then. The only person, but I didn't know tennis because I was a soldier, you know what I mean? And I didn't know American sports people at the time, was Navratilova, Billie Jean King. They weren't part of our psyche back then unless you were into tennis. So they weren't sort of my psyche that anyone was. So as far as I was concerned, no one else was out or open. So when I left the army at 30, I was already a world-class athlete, multi-medalist, number one in the world multiple times. And again, even with the ban being lifted, which I didn't really think about at the time because I'm now into my sport, it was all, well, I can't come out now. So every part of my journey as well, now I can't come out, now I can't say anything, because what if? So I lived the next part of my life, the first part being what if, and the next part being what if somebody finds out, and that's the sort of psyche that I end up having all my life.
Is that I've achieved so much now, could this come crashing down on me if I own who I am and the world knows who I am, really? And that was possibly one of the most painful points in your book, where you're just like, I don't know, even though the ban has been lifted, I now know it's now legal, but will they still strip me? Will the world look at me and go, she's been faking it all this time, she's been hiding who she is, she's not really who we thought she was, would it take away from all your achievements? And that questioning.
Yeah. And they're the sort of irrational things that you end up fearing because you're just worried about people's opinions, which I was always worried about people's opinions and the judgment. And I felt like with my 2 gold medals, I'm put up on a pedestal. I was the first woman ever in Great Britain to do that. And because society back then wasn't like it is now on this conversation, I didn't want my achievements to be diminished by people's arrogant almost and bigotry thought process that actually my sexuality would override what I did. And I thought that was what it would be like back then, and possibly it could have been.
It might.
And I also thought that the army, I could still be in trouble because now I've admitted I was against the law, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I just led that in my life.
Hi, I hope you're enjoying this special episode of Why Care. I wanted to let you know that as we approach the end of Season 4, I'm now looking for guests to join me for Season 5. If you have a powerful diversity, equity and inclusion related story to share, are a thought leader in the space, or maybe you've written a book relevant to the field, drop me a line. I'm passionate about gathering different voices, using Why Care as a platform for storytelling, generating new ideas and stimulating new discussion. Most importantly, I hope these conversations contribute towards a changing mindset and more inclusive behaviours both in the workplace and in society more generally. DM me on LinkedIn or Insta at Nadia Nagamutu to contribute towards this purpose as a guest on the show. Back to the episode. So what changed? I love this story that you shared, 2022 London Pride. And that just sounded like such a powerful moment for you as you sort of went on this parade with your ITV presenters, your fellow colleagues. And you say, it was such a positive atmosphere. And for the first time, I felt that my uniqueness was what made me belong, not what made me different. Maybe you can expound a little bit on that, because I loved that sentence. Beautiful.
Yeah, I think what it was, because I was always afraid to show myself and me, my personality, just sort of, I always had this block, I'd have conversation with people, but it'd be very functional around my job or my role or my titles and all of that lot. There was no ever any personal interaction and fun side of me because I felt people would get too close. So I kind of had a way of having a real conscious second guess conversation with everybody, and I was very careful with how I projected myself and what I spoke about. Like I would never even have, even leading up to 2022, and even though society had changed, any corporate that were doing, I don't know, Pride Month or something, you're not seeing me with anything rainbow, no badge, no nothing, because the moment I had put that connection together, in my eyes, the questions would have come out. So I'm so detached from it, and not an obvious way at all. I just wouldn't go there. I wouldn't talk about it. I wouldn't do any diversity inclusion talks. And I've been a speaker, motivational speaker now for, I don't know, years, 18 years, 19 years.
You couldn't even demonstrate allyship. You couldn't. Just had to properly detach yourself because, oh my goodness.
I had to really detach myself. And the weird thing is that I actually didn't know anyone else that was gay. I didn't know anyone in business. I didn't know anyone in sport. I didn't know anyone in society. I just must have put myself in such a cage that I didn't see it. Like, I am so shocked when I go to the EDAs or to Attitude or to Diva Award. I'm like, how do I not know these people existed? Like, seriously, I had no idea. I went to Attitude Awards, and I was going off piece a bit, but I went to the Attitude Awards. I see all these high profile people there, and then I find out about their background or who they are, and I'm like, how do I not know? This was like, where have I been? Like, where have I been all my life? It was just weird. And so when I went to Pride, I mean, I was super scared of going to Pride. Like, the fact is that I'd already now alluded to the fact I was gay. I mean, so it was easier to now be there. But I didn't know how I was going to feel about being submersed in that world as well, because I'd been so far detached. Now, I know there's an element of people that go, well, of course we knew you were, of course we thought you were, why haven't you come out earlier? But you don't know my story. And it became some of the bits that I was listening to, thinking, where now I have this whole thought process of, there's so many people like me out there that is petrified for whatever reason of really showing their truth. Because you do have an element of people, also the community, that expect you to be a voice for people when you're in the public eye. But if you have a life like I did, that's not a normal and natural thing to suddenly do. And so you're battling against people very proud of you and so happy for you, to people questioning your reasons for not doing it in the first place, without actually understanding people. And this is where I'd say the only way we can ever get to understand people is to communicate more effectively, to talk and be open and honest, and to give people a chance. Because if you suddenly put your narrative to somebody else, you have no idea what they've gone through and what they're doing. And so when I turned up to Pride, I almost had part of me being so like, oh my God, this is just like, wow, what is this? And part of me thinking, no, what do people think, Are they thinking I lied? Or I never lied, I just didn't tell you, And you end up almost answering questions in your head of what might come to you before it does.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I can totally see how you would just spiral, particularly because you are the pride of Britain in many ways, and how can those people's expectations, their perceptions of you, how might that change? There's risk there, right? And of course, that's where the fear comes from, because wherever there's risk, there's fear of how it will be received, what the repercussions will be. But I got a real sense in the book, in that moment, that you just felt it was right to be there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I had such a wonderful time, and I got the chance to stand on stage and kind of say those few words, and it felt really empowering being there, and it felt amazing to be able just to be my authentic self, but with the knowledge that people also knew about my achievements, because I felt, for me, those two coupled were then the next platform for me to have a voice for change, because I realized that when you are in a position where people put you on a pedestal, and then you take a risk that actually is to be a strong advocate and voice, and yet they respect you in this world. I felt at that moment that balance became more even. It wasn't about, oh, she hasn't been supporting us anymore. It was about, right, now we've got somebody else within our community that can be a real strong voice. And that's the area I've got, regardless of, I don't see all the negative stuff, because people that follow me are following me because they like me. So that's the thing, if they're not following me and they're saying things, I can't control that. And I've learned that over the past year. And I have to say that, even from Pride and then the whole year of coming out, it wasn't that everything was rosy, because I didn't know how to change my narrative. I was still worried. Like, sometimes I was going, oh, I can say this now. You know what I mean? Like, instead of all the second guess, changing the way you are with people and agreeing to go for a coffee, or saying you're going away with your partner, your girlfriend, or there was every conversation that I had with people that had not known about me before and now knew was so different to what I'd had all my life. Like, I could just sit in a room and somebody asked me, I know, have I got a partner? I would say yes. Whereas before, you're not even going to get to asking me that question, because I'm not sitting there long enough to have that conversation with you. And there was enough in my story that I realized in my life to have a connection with someone. So where I would go to work and be a motivational speaker, I can talk about my upbringing, being in a care home first few years of my life, my mixed race background. I can talk about being in my culture and my environment. I can speak about being in the army, and it ticks off the boxes with the men in my audience, because as soon as I say I was a soldier, they're like, yeah, oh, and I was like, and then I had enough to say with my mental health part of it, the effects of my sport and everything, without even going to the other parts of why my mental health deteriorated. I can say about being the first athlete or sports person to come out saying they'd had depression and a breakdown. There was enough in my story to not even go here with my sexuality. And that's what I not hid behind, but knew was my safety point. That I've had so many interviews, so many things, they didn't have to go there, because it wasn't a factor in why they had me. I had all these titles, I'm a dame, I'm an honorary colonel. I didn't have to have that. But by not having that, didn't give all of me. And it's not about everyone needing to know I'm gay, because realistically, they shouldn't need to know that.
Of course.
But in the way that society is, the freedom of just living your life and having normal conversation, people underestimate. And they underestimate it from a point of simple things, where most people can go, oh, I'm going away with my husband and my wife and we're going on holiday. And I go, oh, I'm going away with, there's four of us going, and
flitting around.
Four of us going, yeah, my mates.
You're totally right. People underestimate the cognitive load. In psychology, that's what we call it. There's a cognitive load that you're constantly, every minute of your waking hours, you are conscious of what you're saying, the language you're using, what people might read into it. And of course, you grew up at the point of recognizing who you were fully, and in 18 or 19 or whenever it was, you learned how to control your language, control your narrative, as you said. That takes a lot of unlearning. It's so inspiring.
Yeah, it did. It really took a while to feel comfortable with normal, and I say this as normal conversation, every day, normal life, what you're doing, who you're going out, where you're going, who you're going on, just normality of life. That conversation, even though when I came out in June 22, I reckon it took me at least a year to feel comfortable with that. I was doing it and I was proud, but to feel really settled with, look, say what you want and don't worry what better people think. That has taken a long time, because I've always worried about judgment, always worried about what people's opinions, always worried about what people think of me. And I've always done the do-good thing, like the charity and the this, because actually I'm an all right person, I'm a decent person, but I always wanted them to see that anyway, so that they wouldn't think bad of anything else. Oh, it was exhausting, to be honest, exhausting for my whole life.
That's the word I would use. It just sounds exhausting. And I'm so genuinely thrilled, pleased, so happy for you to know that you're in a very different place now. And we're coming to the end of our conversation, and I can't not speak to you about this 20-year anniversary of double gold. Now, I mean, 20 years, where did that go? That's the question, but that's not what I'm going to ask you. That makes me feel old. What are you doing to celebrate? Because I know you've got a charity that obviously you're, the Dame Kelly Holmes Trust. You're doing a trek in Peru. I know you've got something called a Champions Ball. Maybe you could quickly share what you're doing.
Yeah, so obviously 20-year anniversary, and I just feel like, out of loads of things to talk about, I just feel so relieved in this year. We always have milestones of years, but 20 years for some reason, and especially in Olympic year, just feels so powerful. I'm just so pleased I can literally be my absolute, true, authentic self with no worries whatsoever, and I can embrace the power of our voices as women, for one, and I'm going to do whatever I can to amplify the need of true, honest conversation about life and how it affects people in bad and good ways, and amplify my voice, especially for the community. I'm not afraid to say whatever I need to say now to support the community out there in the real world, but equally, in this year, I kind of feel like, it's time now to shout about things I've done that I just let roll on, So my charity has started 16 years ago. We've helped so many disadvantaged young people from areas of deprivation, utilising the skill set of other sporting champions for them to have the competence and self-belief to become somebody. We've got my first ever proper fundraiser, so it's a charity ball, a Champions Ball, which is almost like a testimonial for my 20-year anniversary, but also sort of a fundraiser for my charity, and that's going to be just a special time, and that's in May. And then I've always wanted to go to Peru because I love the spiritual side of the Inca Trail and things. I've never had time, never been able to fit it in, and I thought, do you know what, this year I'm going to do it. So we're going in September. So if anyone wants to look out, follow Dame Kelly Holmes Trust or me on Dame Kelly Holmes on Instagram. But doing this trek, and just really want to embrace that moment of, this is sort of a liberation for me. Towards the end of the year, I've really come into myself, and I'm going to sit on top of that mountain and go, I did it.
Oh my goodness, Colleen. I will be with you, following you on your socials. I have to highly recommend following Kelly on socials, because what you put out there is so powerful, and it is so truly you. And that's what I appreciate, because there's so much out there on the socials. When I watch you and I hear you on Insta, I'm really looking forward to seeing you on that journey, and stand at the top and yell at the top of your voice, whatever you want to do at the top, because you should celebrate being you, being Definitely. The fabulous you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kelly. I can't thank you enough for this time. I know you have a huge amount going on, and I'm excited for you, and I'm just thrilled for everything that you're doing and everything that's going to happen in 2024 for you. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, and thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. And it's nice to be able to just have that sort of authentic talk and be able to be in a position to do it, to be honest. So thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Everything that Kelly and I spoke about today is going to be available on the usual place, avonaireconsultingservices.com, under podcasts. Gosh, what a pleasure. What an honour. So inspiring, Kelly. And just be well, be happy, be you.
Thank you.
That concludes this special Why Care episode. I can't get over the stories Kelly shared of the witch hunt in the military and the ridiculous rules. So grateful times have changed, but also aware of the constant challenges faced by people in the LGBTQ+ community. Kelly's story is inspiring, and I know makes such a difference to those who have shared a similar path and still remain fearful of expressing who they really are. Thank you so much, Kelly, for your courage to help create a better, more inclusive world. As always, I really appreciate your support of this podcast through leaving a review on whatever platform you're listening, and spreading the word by sharing it with your friends and family. Huge thanks to Mauro at Kenji Productions for editing this podcast, and Jenny Linton for supporting with the show notes and getting it out there on social media.